you don't understand the business problem or the business need or the business value driver, there's actually no point. It's great to jump through all the hoops with data and to be seen as a data professional, etc. But if we're not meeting the business need, what are we doing? So that's really the end goal in this whole thing. So thanks, Howard.
Thanks, Paul. All right, so guys, we've got quite a bit to deal with today. Today's focus is on data quality. We went through embedding data management practices, the different data lifecycle. This is what Paul was referring to in terms of the top data goal that we have for data citizens. So just maybe something that Paul didn't share, we also have sessions for what we call the data professional, and then also the data executive. Okay, so the professional is someone like Henny, myself, other people around here that have been operating in this field for quite some time. Henny, I don't know how many years you've been building BI systems for.
Yeah, it's about 13 odd years.
Okay.
Give or take.
Fantastic. So yeah, we've been building this stuff for a while. We take it all for granted. And so the things we face compared to what data citizens face, they are the guys that typically make use of the data that we provide from a BI point of view. They get it into Excel or some sort of report, and they've got to make these decisions. And what we're trying to do in terms of helping the data citizen is to recognize when they've got dirty data, what they're doing is not really their job. That's not to say that you can now just put up your hands and say, not going to be done, but it's then about communicating with the appropriate people to get some of it sorted out, or to mention that, guys, we're spending so much time wrangling the data in Excel that we're actually not doing effective decision making. Okay, so the decision making challenges that we had, we actually did that thing. I'll show you the results of that when we finish off. But the top data pain was dirty data. That's what we were told. There's the definition of dirty data: rogue data, inaccurate, incomplete, inconsistent, things like that. All these fancy terms. So today is that day that we're going to get there, and we're going to start off with what I refer to as the data quality improvement lifecycle. All right, so now we're really going to focus on this dirty data and try to give some perspective in terms of, Paul, I see you got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question or?
No, I just wanted to, as a courtesy to everybody that's logged in, we are recording the session. So if you have a comment or question and you feel it's private in terms of your organization or something, just please be aware of that. But we are recording it, so for future use, and we're building our content as well. So just to let you know.
Okay,
thanks.
Great. So this is it was actually quite interesting. The Stuart and Deming cycle. These were one of the guys that wrote this paper in the 90s. And this was what they referred to in the research or academic world as this was a seminal paper. And they started talking about how do we continually improve data quality. And they created this plan, do, check, act approach. And so the plan stage is that the data quality team or the data citizens that have been fighting with this data for quite some time within a department do an assessment of the amount or the extent of dirty data and the impact that it has on the business and the priority of some of these issues. Now, and I can certainly help you guys. The idea with data quality is not that you go and do some fancy coding in Excel to overcome the problems. It's more about getting to the root cause, okay, and ensuring that you start addressing them and take them back to the application. Now, a lot of the times you as business or whatever it is, you're not responsible for that data. So that's where a data steward comes into play, or data governance comes into play. You would almost raise these issues with them, and it would be for them to fix the problem. That may be in a different department. It may be the fact that you're sharing third-party data, and they've got to take action in terms of sorting this out. We then go into the do stage, which is addressing the issues at the root cause. It's always better to do it there, because if you think about it, if you fix it in your Excel spreadsheet and somebody else goes and pulls the same data in their spreadsheet and they're not aware of it, well, the problem just comes back again. So it's a whole lot cheaper on the business if you fix it at the root. Now, that's not always possible. For example, if you have a big SAP system and people are typing in dirty data, you can't fix that as easily as you would like, but at least we understand where it is and what we do, how we need to work with that. And then what it also does is it plans for the ongoing monitoring of the quality of the data. Okay, so it's monitoring what the quality of the information we have. We then get into the check stage, which actively monitors the data against standards. So we would define, for example, the data quality expectation as part of the planning stage. They would then go and hopefully address it. The check would bring the data in and then compare it to the standard that you've defined, or what I refer to as the data quality expectation. So if you have to do a certain calculation, and just give you a simple example, and you want to divide A by B and B is 0, well, you're going to continually fail in that in your Excel. So you would set a standard to say, well, B can't be 0. Now, I know you guys are pretty jacked up in Excel and programming like that, so you'd put all these if statements in, but the whole thing, I mean, if you're getting B equal to 0, it's really screwing with the numbers, and the impact of that can be quite big. So part of this check phase is to say, if I receive data like this, if it doesn't adhere to my acceptable range of data quality, what do I do? Okay. Now, it says here, bring it to acceptable levels, but I've got the data in this morning and I've got to make a decision. So what do I do? Now, sometimes we get caught ourselves by trying to fix it, only to find that the data was wrong, and then they ship a fix the week later, or whatever it is, and our numbers change. And then we look like we look like we're not sure what's going on, and our numbers are continually changing under our feet. And it gives you a really embarrassing situation to be in. I've done this too many times in BI systems where we see the problem, we get told, I just fix it like this. But there's a fundamental problem, and it skews the numbers, and then we get caught, and we tend to take on all the blame for someone else's problem. Now, please get me right here. I'm not trying to say you got bad data, you put your hands up and you say you can't do any work. You're probably not going to survive too long if you take that approach. But it is about recognizing it, making people aware of it, and understanding the impact of it. And then also understanding sometimes when the data is so bad, you actually can't make a decision. You should not keep everybody in the dark, make a decision, and then as if everything was okay. Now, yes, your intentions were good. You didn't want to shout and say you can't do it, but next minute you adding all sorts of interesting logic that portrays a different picture to what's actually happening on the root system. And then the final phase is dealing with these issues, acting on it and responding to it. And then we keep going round and round and round. in this life cycle. Any questions on that? Are you guys? I see one or two hearts or likes on that. Is there only one person that's experienced those challenges?
Yeah. From my side, I can definitely relate. I mean, it's been the story, I think, since I started out in the BI space. The problem is always, obviously, as BI, like you said, you need to defend data that you basically inherit.
Yeah.
And you need to fix that at a source. So, I mean, you cannot fix that in the BI systems.
Yeah.
But everywhere you go, you see how there's basically a plaster put on top of those dirty data on all the applications. So those rules that you mentioned that needs to be governed, that should be defined and be made available centrally.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't only affect BI, it affects all the applications.
Yeah. You're right, because it's, if I pull in a quick Excel dump and I do some data on it and it's got a problem in it, well, I'm going to suffer from the same problem that BI suffered from.
Yes.
And Henny and I have worked with this saying for too long, is if you have BS in, then the BI goes out.
Unfortunately.
Howard, does that then maybe the reason why data lineage from an IFRS point of view is so important, so that they are able to quantify where all the information comes from, so it's a lot easier to identify if there are errors and mistakes, or is it, is that a way that they try to standardize that sort of check stage?
You're actually finding that so many regulations are now looking for lineage.
Yes.
And there are several aspects to lineage. One is when you got the data, what were the transformations that you applied to the data? So what they're trying to pick up is, did you do any fancy transformations to the original data, and why? So there's almost a validation check. And people need to know, especially the accountants that sign it off, they need to know that any twisting or manipulation of the numbers has been well audited and it adheres to some of the rules. So that's one of the areas. The other area is to say, well, where did you get this data from? Is it from an external party? And what is the trust level of that external party? So they may be giving you data that's very clean, but it's all cooked. Okay, and we're seeing that with all sorts of cyber attacks and things like that. And one also has a situation, and they refer to that term as provenance, and that comes from the art industry, where after a while they were getting so hoodwinked by these guys who would manipulate the art and create forgeries that they couldn't detect it, or they would take them a long time, that they said, well, there's an easy way to do that. Well, who did you get the art from? And if it's not a trusted party, well, then we don't really trust the data that you're putting in front of us. So there's a whole lot of benefits that you get out of lineage. You get that people fiddled with it. So think about what happens in Excel. You get it in Excel, you get it in a data table, a data dump, you then run a VBA script on it, you clean this, you then pivot it, you do that, and 3 or 4 spreadsheets later or worksheets later, you get the answer. When you look at the final answer, and I've been involved in some of that thing, the guy he's got a data dump, he's got a pivot table, and then he's got a template which looks like a report, and he does a copy and paste with some calculations that link to the pivot table, and he dumps it in this report. When you look at the data in the report, you have no idea where it came from. And then you ask yourself the question, how did you get this number? And you don't know, and that's how lineage helps you bring that out into the open.
So does it play a role in the data quality?
Yes, it certainly does. So it plays a role in the trustworthiness of the data that you're looking at. And I'll show you some dimensions. When they refer to a dimension called accuracy, it is, do you balance to the source of the data? One element of it. And how accurate is it in the real world? So if I cross-check myself to the source, am I in line with the source? And that's lineage and transformations.
Okay, so it's an accuracy verification.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a lineage. Now, if you think about it, I got it from Joe, Joe got it from Fred, Fred got it from Jim, Jim got it from Reuters. Okay, how many fingers were in the way? How many interesting calculations happened there? Are we comfortable that that number is still correct?
Cool. Yep.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
that's really helpful in understanding the challenges that we're facing. So this is the way in which quality needs to be tackled. It's a never-ending story. It never ends. You can never take your eye off this quality side of it, because when it goes bad, no one knows it, no one sees it. Things have happened, we don't know, and all of a sudden you've got a number on the report that some manager looks and says, I don't trust this. And then you've got to go and look around, and you finally find the problem where someone twisted it down the bottom here. So the cycle's all about this continuous improvement, continuous monitoring, and picking it up as soon as we know about it. And one of the things I like from my BI point of view is I like to have a scenario where if I fix, I also want to display the number that I got from my friend before me, my number, my fixed number, and what is the variance, and then allow business to make a decision as to whether that variance is acceptable, yes or no. And actually to show them on what we refer to as the critical data elements that there's been this change. Anyone else got a question on that?
Howard, maybe just from a practical side of things, and I'm probably just asking the group if there's anybody willing to admit or to stick their neck out. Are you receiving data? Is anybody in the group that receives data and just sucks it up basically and transforms it to make it look pretty for what you need to do, rather than reporting it back to up the line to find these problems? Because, and the reason I ask is because maybe you don't know who to talk to, and maybe you don't know the correct process to follow. And I know every organization may be unique in that, but there is an answer to that, number one. And the environment that I came from, and even working with the data team quite closely, it was an ongoing struggle where the guys were pulling data from the warehouse and they were just sucking it up, and all they had in their mind was delivering the report to that account manager, or all they had in their mind was delivering the client report at the end of the month. And they didn't take the time, or maybe they didn't know how or what to say or what to do to actually push back and say, no, I'm not going to accept this anymore. So maybe there's somebody there that wants that. And maybe, I know you mentioned it, Howard, but maybe just to repeat, the individuals or the teams that this kind of thing should be reported back to, like you said, governance, data quality team, depending on the organization, that's all going to be different, probably size and all that. But what's your recommendation there? I suppose also understanding the business rule, or understanding what the business requirement or rules are around that piece of data would also help in finding and tracking the source of this thing.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe just to help you, Paul, one maybe should ask this the other way. Anyone who doesn't have the problem, and I know there are some people that are, some of the guys that have well-controlled data warehouses, and even that, they're still picking up problems and still having it. But when your maturity, your data stewardship is at a higher level, they actually create specific issue remediation things where people can report on this. So those are the guys that are typically the guys that are not facing it, but all of the others, they would typically have that scenario.
For me personally, I think the challenge is, and I agree with your approach, you need to reflect what's happening on a source. So the last thing you want to do is bring in a lot of transformations that you cannot justify later on. So those checks and balances are key. So you need to reflect what's happening at the source. I think the challenge that in most corporations or organizations is where to from there. I mean, you've identified a problem. there's awareness on the problem, but the data steward roles and the data governance around that, the roles and responsibilities are not always well defined.
Yeah. And Henny, I think both you and I worked on a customer where the BI team was constantly fighting with data quality, and it didn't matter how many times you mentioned it, but what it takes is almost a very active dashboard or a report that starts to quantify the size of the data quality problem. That's critical. And this is this first stage that a lot of times as BI developers we don't do. We don't go and assess the scope. Now, you don't need to wait for a DQ team to come along. You need to assess the scope, define the impact, prioritize it, and explain it to business so that someone takes an action. And that may be the data steward, that may be the data governance team, whoever it is, but somewhere along the line, business needs to say, guys, we can't keep on going like this. We're running into trouble.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the simple measure you can introduce is that at the previous slide, we used to refer to the data quality dashboards.
Yes.
Just to raise the visibility on those data challenges.
And I see, when I see maturity, I see BI dashboards that have got data quality information all over them. Yes. And that to me would be the big question. How many of you guys, when you get data, and even when you get it from an external party, do you see any form of data quality in it? Do they make you aware of some of the challenges that they're facing? Or as an example, this field was null, but we set it to 0. And now null and 0 mean two different things, but sometimes they're unaware of it. And that to me is always a sign of maturity, is when I see data quality explained and visible in the reports, in the warehouse. That's when you start seeing maturity.
Agreed.
And I suppose if we, to be honest, is the number of people that maybe on this call that can clearly enumerate what the quality, what the dimensions of quality are, and what do they mean. I don't find too many data citizens that can do that. They know they got problems, but the quantification and the expression is not always there, and it almost needs that level of understanding to go back to what we refer to as the custodian of that data, be it the BI team, be it the application, whatever it is, to stand and say, guys, we got a problem, and this is the size of the problem. Okay.
Sorry, Howard, just to that point, I was listening to the coffee conversation with the gentleman, Craig, and the gentleman from Pakistan.
Yeah.
And just a reminder about that, the data usage is normally only 5% of the data that organizations have. So if you're looking at, if you're playing around with 5% of the data, how are you actually managing to do 100% data quality?
Help me a little bit there in terms of the 5%. Explain that statistic a little bit more.
So basically, they're saying that in companies and in the financial services, that the amount of data that they actually use, so they have data lakes and that, is only about 5%.
Is it so? This is always the important thing: is 5%. 5% of what? So, for example, if I have a BI, I mean, I've got 100% of the, or I'm saying maybe I've got 80% of the source system. So if I take SAP, or if I take a product system, and we've been doing data warehousing, we've loaded a large percentage of that. That's of the data that we have. Now, certainly when it comes into other things like AI and correlations and linking onto other data sets, now we start bringing in a whole lot of data that we're making decisions on, and we're not sure of where that comes from and what the quality of that data is. Is that what you're referring to?
Okay, yeah, no, I understand where I'm misinterpreting it. So I'll listen to that component again, because again, I suppose in the life cycle of the data, it changes. So like you say, if you're using 100% of that source, and then it's then going into decision, and you don't need to use that everything in that source. Okay, no, that's fine. I understand. Thanks for that.
And you're bringing a really nice point in there, because BI typically is a copy of what's going on in the business, and it's really helpful in that, in terms of it tells you where we currently are. Okay. So it gives us an understanding of what is happening in the business with respect to the applications that we have. And I know with Henny and stuff like that, these guys are working for years, pulling all that data and preparing it for the business, because the business need to have a way of understanding what happened this month, last month. And you think with a lot of accounting systems, all that's done. I mean, but it's then, does that answer all? Does that provide you with all the information to make a decision? Now we're talking about a whole lot of other issues. Anyone? Was there some feedback from somebody? Okay. All right. I'd like to move on. Are there any questions? Meneer, I know you normally have a lot of questions. Are you okay?
I'm just enjoying the conversation. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. So this is when I refer to a data quality expectation, which I like to go back to my SME of the data. Who understands the business requirement of the data the best? Who understands that data? They're the ones that help me define what we refer to as the business quality rules and the data quality expectation. And they would take each data set that they have, and I always remember this when I start off with people that I haven't engaged with before, and we ask them, what is your expectation of the quality of the data? And the honest answer on most of them is 100%. I expect there to be no problems. There are not many of them that you say, well, you know, if you give me 40% of good data, then I'm happy. I haven't heard too many do that. Maybe I'm living in another world. Any of you heard anybody that expects the data to be only at 40% accuracy?
No, I mean, the benchmark's always around 100. So
yeah,
but again, the reality is you're very far from that mark.
Great.
And it only surfaces in the BI applications.
Right. And what I like about doing this data quality expectation is we take one of these dimensions at a time, and we sit with the business and say, if we take a data set for this column, for this attribute, think about an Excel spreadsheet, column A, and that may be the invoice number or the invoice ID. How accurate do you expect that column to be in respect to the agreed source? So you can see here we've got the dimension, and then we've got concepts. So this diagram on the right describes the relationship between a dimension, what is the underlying concept, and how do we measure it? Okay, so from an accuracy point of view, there are two important concepts on accuracy. Is what is the agreement with the real world? And I love this discussion. And then what is the match to the agreed source? And then, but what you'll also see is accuracy talks about the precision of data values. So if I have a floating number, have I got any rounding issues in terms of that? Does it total up? And valid value control. So you can see these two lines point. So accuracy is more than just these two. But these are the questions that you have with the SME. And I've got into this discussion with statisticians in this scenario, when, as an example of agrees with the real world, they would do some statistical numbers, and we look at the data and we say, okay, how many respondents did you get from the survey? They said, oh, we got 10 responses. What's the universe? Oh, that's 1,000. What is it like in terms of the agreement with the real world? Well, it's pretty poor. Does that ever get reported? Not really. You'll find a lot of times we pick up agreed source, but the mapping to the real world and the agreement of what percentage are we picking up, that's becoming more and more a reality when they do statistical analysis to say, what is the universe? And then what is the collection, the sample set of the universe? Okay. And then we go into completeness and consistency. So you can see all the different elements here. And what we typically do is we choose a set of dimensions. You don't want to choose all of them. I've seen in some cases, there's like 129 of them. That may take you just a step too far, way too far. And a lot of times we're seeing around about 6 dimensions in use and in play. And what are the important dimensions? But what you'll do, as I explain, you compare it to a column. What is the dimensions that are applicable to that column? And then you may not be aware of this, and I don't find many people do it. What is the quality dimension at a row level? And then what is the quality dimension at a data set level? So the accuracy at a column level compared to the accuracy at a row level and compared to the accuracy of a data set level, there are quite different measurements and things that you need to do there. So let's give you an example of accuracy. I think we all know the accuracy at a column level. That may be ID number. Does it link to the source? Yes, it does. Or it may be invoice number, or it may be a financial indicator, or it may be the quantity of the trade or the financial trade. It says for this trade ID, the quantity was 10 units. And I've seen that Reuters then does certain transformations and it says, oh, well, I got 100 units. But you've got to know how Reuters reports it, and then you've got to understand that there's a transformation that happens in that scenario. Now, when you come to a row level, what you're saying is, I don't just compare one column, I take all of my critical columns and they all have to be in line. They all have to agree to the source. And then when you come to a data set level, you say, of all the million rows in this data set, I can only have 5 or 100 or 1,000 that are allowed to be inaccurate. Those are what we talk about as metric. I can accept an error rate of 5 in a million. It's not what do the accountants call it? I'll think about the term, not material.
Material, yes.
That's right. Sorry. So it's not material, so don't worry about it. Okay. So, but you've got to have these discussions, and as Henny says, it's not 100%, but you've got to talk about what is material, and then when it exceeds the material, or when it comes below it. So let's say I've got 10,000 rows that are wrong, and you told me 1,000. I've got to be able to say, guys, the trust in this data set is out of the bracket that we've defined. Any questions on that side? I'm sure there should be loads of discussions now.
Howard, I just want to touch on a previous comment where we spoke about thresholds.
Yes.
And the relevance of thresholds.
Yes.
And to your point, 100%, I think every time we ask the question with regards to what's your threshold for pain on a specific attribute, etc., it's either 100% or it's silence.
Yeah.
Right. So how relevant are thresholds?
Oh,
and why do we keep on impressing those?
That's probably one of your biggest discussion points that you have. They come in with a starting point of it needs to be 100%. What I like to have this debate about them is to say, the decision that you're going to make based on this data set. So let's look at all the decisions. You're going to do certain calculations at a group level when you sum everything together. If I've got 80% of my data that's wrong in the quantity field, for example, I didn't know that I had to divide the Bloomberg number by 100 or I need to multiply whichever way that worked. what are the quantums that are going to change my decision? So what is the impact on the decision? An example of that means that I need to sell. I bought too much and I need to sell. So what level of quality is going to drive an action that I don't want to happen? And that's sometimes what we don't do is, because we don't understand the decisions that are being made on the data, we don't know how to call them out to say, you know what, if you get 5% of your data wrong, you're going to make the wrong decision. And your action is going to be incorrect. So we need to have the limit between, basically the limit will be between 95, anything below 95 is a problem. Anything between 95 and 100 is fine. That's the range, and I can work on that. And I don't need to cry wolf when.
Sorry, I think you raised a very important point there. If you understand what's the purpose of that measure, I mean, then you can make a decision on a threshold. And I think in most cases, there's no link between the strategic drivers and the operational KPIs.
Yeah. You also find, Henny, unfortunately, with both the DQ team and the BI team, the understanding of metrics, measures, calculations, and decisions that are made is pretty low. It's not always documented to the level that we want, and so they don't understand the impact always in terms of that. And that's where you've got to come back to an SME of the data set to say, the purpose of this data is to make these decisions. And we quickly get into what people refer to as a CDE, which is a critical data element. An example of that would be the GDP figure. If the Reserve Bank gets a GDP figure that's incorrect for this current quarter, they need to down tools and say, until this GDP is agreed and accepted, we are not going to go into forecasting, predicting, and doing anything that may just snowball the impact of this further down. So that is an area that we miss, and we don't always understand when we, especially as custodians of the data and people who prepare the data for data citizens to report on. We were just told, guys, get the data from here, put it in here, make sure that I can access it, do this calculation, and Bob's your auntie. We left with half the story. And sometimes we don't quantify what those decisions are. And I find that by implementing the data quality expectation approach, you force these discussions out. Why do you need to have it at that level? And if you don't have this discussion, the answers don't come out and your insights are not where they should be. Everyone comfortable with that?
Comfortable, thanks.
And your first important point is to say, okay, guys, we're not going to boil the ocean. I typically hate that term because sometimes that excuses us from not doing a proper job. But it's a case of saying, guys, if you're starting off with a data quality problem and you want to introduce some cleanups and issues and some opportunities, we're going to go back and say, guys, this data is crap. Sorry, there's no other word for it, but if you ask me to make a decision on this, I'm in all sorts of trouble. You may only just start with accuracy as an example. All right, and then as you get better, you start doing that, and you start improving your monitoring and understanding of it. So if you go in the beginning and you do everything, it's going to take you so long to implement that you're not going to get to where you need to be. So one dimension at a time, one specification at a time, 6 max in the beginning. Don't go too far. That's important. And something that I wanted to share with you as well here there are certain dimensions that are they need judgment. They actually need a little bit more analysis by the SME to decide whether that is a dirty data element or not. Does anyone or everybody understand what I just meant by that comment? And if you do, can someone give me an example of dimensions that can't be called that I've got a problem, they need further assessment? So accuracy is pretty easy, right? The number doesn't balance to the source. I, as a developer, as a BI, ETL guy, I can check it out. It doesn't match. Sorry, guys. Sorry for you. Completeness agrees to the real world. There's a problem. I don't know that what the superset is. So I can't check that. And I may need to go and say, unless they can tell me, I can't always check it. So there are cases where, yes, Nikki.
Timelessness.
Okay, timeliness. Timeliness is what was the latency in getting that data onto the report. So if I need that information, and I always use this example of T being the month end, and then we got T+1, T+2, T+3. If I need data by T+3 because I'm getting data at T+4, and it's dependent on the data before there, if that data actually comes at T+5, I'm in all sorts of trouble. So the timeliness of the data, it's too late. It got to me too late. I have a quality issue.
Howard, is the question, what dimension requires further unpacking?
Yes.
Yeah,
Would
that's
that
what I
not
was.
be would that not be reasonableness?
Yes, that's a great example. So I do a lot of balance sheet analysis, and you look at the data and for example, the completeness, the accuracy, everything's there, guys. It's all balancing. It's consistent. Everything makes sense. But you know what? This number, when I compare it to last quarter, when I compare it to last year, this time, it's like an 80% growth. And it's like, but we shouldn't have that. And that's where the SME says, you know what, reasonable movement on a line item in a balance sheet may be 10%. If you get it over 10%, then tell me about it. Don't just throw the data back and say we're not going to deal with it. We just need someone to analyze it and look at whether it's making sense. Now, I'm sure you guys have all sorts of other issues that reasonable comes into play. If I've got movement of sales figures or whatever it is, that reasonableness is an important check. If you've got a steady pipeline and you've been doing this for a long time, reasonableness is a good check because you may get a massive drop in sales. And someone's got to pay attention. Don't just keep on going. Someone's got to look at it. I saw that with SAB when some of their reports were running. All of a sudden they were getting zero sales figures that are coming out, and so they did all these checks and they did all these calculations compared to period analysis. And they were getting all sorts of problems, and they, of course, with a lockdown, that was the reason for it. But nowhere in the data could they see this, and all sorts of hell broke loose in terms of the reporting and the T+1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because they just ran through it, trying to get to the end, do the reporting, and then they realized, oh, the numbers had fallen off the wall. And then the same happened when they opened back up again. There were some really interesting figures for some of the alcohol makers. Is that they almost had an increase in sales for when it opened up in I think it was August when it opened up. They had never had such a improvement in their sales figures in the history of the company. So. But then all sorts of other calculations went funny and wrong. Any other questions? Okay. Seems like you guys all know you got it all sorted.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mind an explanation for most of them, but I think maybe it's a takeaway point to go and study up a little bit and maybe get some feedback for next time.
Yeah, I can do that, and I think I've actually got it. I don't have it here, but so you can actually, when you read it, so for example, accuracy, it's matching to the agreed source. Completeness, all the rows are populated, the columns are populated, the tables populated. Okay, so if I look at an attribute, I don't have any empty fields, but I've also got a limit on that. Consistency, when there's logical consistency, adheres to the rules, and also it's consistent with the source, and that's also in some cases the right format. Then I have currency, so current with the world. Is it a reflection of the world as we speak right now? How up to date is the information? A good example of that is if I have shoe size on my master data for my customer, and I'm going to suggest that he buys another pair of shoes like this. And unfortunately, the last time that the shoe size was updated was 10 years ago. I'm going to give him a wrong answer, especially if he's a teenager. It may work on me, but teenagers are not going to work on. Data integrity means that it's got the appropriate valid values. Precision is with floating point. Privacy is controls. So have I got data that I shouldn't be seeing? That's a quality issue. Reasonableness, we spoke about. Timeliness is the latency. Uniqueness is for duplications. And then validity. Have I derived my calculation appropriately? Is there, for example, gender? Have I got 2 values in terms of the value set, or have I got 20 values? Which one's right? And accessibility is, do I have access to the information in that scenario? Access control, retention. That's a really quick summary, Paul. I can go into a little bit more detail. I think it's more about, we know that we can now take this, everything must be right, everything must be correct, to let's talk about it one dimension at a time from an expectation point of view, and let's see where our challenges are, so that when we go back to look at fixing this, we understand the size of it. Fixing a survey, we only had 10 surveys out of 1,000, that's a lot harder than fixing it to the fact that we lost some records when we moved it from SAP. The challenge is a lot bigger. Okay, so I always like to challenge my data quality people with, they've done all this stuff, and then I say, and so what? Okay, so what does it mean? You've told me that I've got all sorts of challenges, so what? Now, are you telling me that we don't pull the data anymore? Okay, so now the fix is not going to happen tomorrow. The fix is, we've actually got to work with it right now. And this is where I come into a scenario of, we need to really understand our decision quality. That's what drives the business. What is the quality of our decision making? And when we look at the quality of decision making, there's only one area where data quality fits into, and that's relevant and reliable information. Okay? But there's all sorts of other issues that we need to pay attention to. All right? We need to understand what is the context that we getting this data in and making decisions based on. What alternatives are we willing to entertain? What are the values and purposes and trade-offs? And then what are the reasoning algorithms that we're going to use to make the decision? And once we've got all this data, what is our commitment to action? So there's all this area over here that we need to start paying attention to. So I wanted to just do a quick survey with you guys in terms of the way in which you make decisions as the data citizen. Not so much as a custodian or a person who's moving the data, but and then maybe, for example, Manira, if you as a BI person, you interact with the business, are you aware of how they've looked at their decision quality? And if you can, guys, if you wouldn't mind adding this to us in terms of, are you aware of the frame in which the decision or the context? What alternatives are acceptable? Sometimes we push ourselves to have only one answer, but there's always multiple answers. How do we get the multiple answers and alternatives that we can use to make a decision? Then relevant and reliable information, that's where we spent a lot of time. What are the trade-offs? What reasoning do we use to make a decision? And then how committed are we to action? Does everyone understand the question I'm asking? Everyone's quiet. No one's voting.
Maybe maybe you just want to frame that question one more time.
Okay. So we've spoken all about this data quality, and I've spent ages with you trying to explain, how accurate it is and stuff like that. And we then we do all this quality, and it passes. It passes the quality check. Does that mean we're going to get good decisions coming out from the business?
So I would, so without overcooking it, and I would say it depends, right? So granted that all your transformations are in order, you interpreted the business rules and you coded it correctly, etc., and there's no internal processing that could have warped the data in any way, then I would say definitely yes, because you're not circumventing poor data quality. You're not catering for poor data quality, so definitely.
So my question would be to you is a case of, how many times do business have a situation where what comes out on the BI report has all the information for them to make a decision?
So, look, if I understand you correctly, I would actually say, based on, so my team's kind of unique, is that we have a BI team together with a data quality team, and the two work hand in hand. And if there's any data quality issues, they seem to address it and cater around the data quality issue.
Yeah. So maybe I'm not explaining properly. What I try to show here when it comes to making a decision or the quality of decision making at business is, whilst they have done a whole lot of good work in terms of getting the information, do they understand the context of all of that information to be able to make the decision? Do they understand all the possible alternatives in terms of making the decision? Does the data address all of that? And is it about a scenario where they get a number on a report and they can go straight from that number of 22 means that they take this action? Is from a business point of view. And maybe to give you an example, one would do ask when a customer asks for credit, an assessment on the credit. We'll get a certain amount of that information from TransUnion, as an example. They'll give us a certain understanding. Do we have all the information from that data that we've presented? Do we have all the information that we need to make a decision on that client request?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say,
yeah.
So they wouldn't have the full context of it. They just have the report and the value, and then make a decision on there.
Right.
If there were any probably areas where we transform the data to cater for poor data quality, etc., they wouldn't have line of sight of that.
Right. But I suppose my question is coming back to, even if you guys are doing a tremendous job on your quality coming up and you report it as, I've got troubled data, or I only know, on this customer that I'm reporting on, I only see one of his credit products. I don't see all of them. we must, the business needs to ask itself, well, I've got a certain amount of information that's relevant and reliable. In terms of the context, is it all of the data that I need to make a decision, or do I need to clearly define the frame in the context in which this should be made? What are my alternatives? So these are non-data warehouse related elements that affect the decision. But a lot of times as data warehouse professionals and BI professionals, we are unaware of all of these things. Would you agree with that?
So that also then goes to what we call the bias of that decision that's come out. So if, for example, they put more emphasis on your credit rating as opposed to your judgment, for example. So again, we may have all the information, but the weight at what they put the decision on that information can change the outcome. So in terms of what you're saying, the frame and the alternatives and the relevant reliability, those things then come in, the clear values and trade-offs and the sound reasoning. So that's
yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand.
Yes, so we tend to provide as much information as we can from a data professional point of view, but when you go and really sit with the business and when you start seeing the fact that guys, they're almost using our warehouse as an ETL tool to get it into Excel so that they can add other stuff to it to get the frame, the alternatives, the values, and then complete their decision making, you know that we're not giving them everything they need to make
So
a good.
I think I got you now. So I think the question that you are framing is, does business have the relevant context into the
Yes.
underlying data that was used to produce the BI or MI? And the answer to that is no. Generally, they use the BI and MI. I think the reality, if we profile the data with the business and walk the journey with them, you'd come out to different decisions in terms of formulating your BI or MI.
Okay, so I'm actually I'm not. I think I'm not explaining it well. So the business come to us and they say they want the data. We build the warehouse. We get the quality definitions, like you said. You've got a team that does that, and you get it into the report. And you are pretty confident that A, you'll detect quality issues, and B, if asked, you can prove the lineage and you can prove the accuracy and things like that. Now, we have a data set, but in terms of the business making that decision, right, in terms of them having to make the decision, they may not be able to get all the data from a source within the company. They may have to get it from picking up the phone, going to do some website checks or whatever it is, and building a wider understanding of it to complete their decision-making process. Not so much the BI's decision-making in terms of doing calculations, but their decision in terms of understanding all of the elements that may affect the decision. Like Nikki raised of, okay, I've got this data. Now, because I don't understand other elements to it, I can either predict it or I can try to come up with a proxy for it. And then if I have biases, I know that I'm going to do this calculation incorrectly and come up with the wrong answer. Does that, Meneer, am I explaining it better or?
Yeah, I'll let Irfan take a step at it. Irfan?
Okay.
Okay, since I'm new in the area, I look to business a lot to interpret this data and tie it to the underlying data, right? So the business people that I actually deal with have a good understanding of the data and some expectation of the data based on the figures that I produce.
Yes.
So
now, Abdul, what is that? Is that your first name? Am I correct?
it's
Abdul?
Irfan.
Irfan. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. So the challenge we come in, and maybe to give you an example, a real example of what happens. Let's talk about the Reserve Bank. I work with them quite a lot, and I help them with their data, and I help the economists. So they go and pull all the figures. They pull GDP figures and stuff like that. They pull the exchange rate, and then they go into what's referred to as the Monetary Policy Commission Committee that makes a decision. Do we play around with the basis points, the index? Do we adjust it or not? Now, they don't have all the information. The people have done a great job for them getting the GDP figures, but they don't have all the information to be able to say, if I see these numbers, then the new index is going to be set, or the new rate of exchange is going to be set to that level. Okay, so they've got some gaps in the data and the decision that needs to be made, right? They've got some data, but they don't have all data to have a monkey see, monkey do. If this, then that, right?
Yes.
So what they need to do now is they need to define a decision-making process that describes the information that they have, plus the other areas of context that they need to look at in helping them make that final decision about what rate to set to the change to make to the rate. So when we, as much as we would like it, we can't give them all the information that they require to make a decision of the new rate is 15 or it's been changed by 5 points or whatever that may be. Does that?
So okay, I'm trying to understand. So is that the commentary that we would send out with stats to business to allow them to use the data effectively, or the stats effectively?
Yeah, it's, I suppose what I'm not explaining properly is you give them as much data as you can and you have, but it's not all the information they need to make a decision. They are still missing certain pieces of data that they may never be able to get and to complete the decision cycle.
Howard, it's Adalia. I'm just thinking now, as you explained, would it be something like data, like for instance, you have to look at social media trends or something, the news, or something totally outside there that happened that you actually need to take into account
100%.
for final decision?
What's the sentiment? What is the political environment like? So when they make a decision, it's got a whole frame, a context in which that decision is made. The data isn't the whole story.
Yes, then I understand you.
Munir, does that thanks, Adele, that was a good. Sorry, Munir, I interrupted.
So the 360 view of.
Yes.
So I say just a 360 view
of everything that's required to make the decision. So what I'm always finding fascinating is saying when I try to talk to business and I ask them, explain to me how you do it and what all required. A lot of times they can't do that. So the framing hasn't been done very rigorous. So we just get told what they know we have, and they say, go and get it for me. But we don't understand all the other areas and how they're framing it. And I think as professionals, we need to lift ourselves a little bit higher in terms of helping people understand what else comes into decision making. And it's not just, of course, relevant and reliable data is there, but we've got some certainties and uncertainties. What is uncertain? What is certain? And we always, and a never-ending thing to transform uncertain to certain by providing them with data. That's the role we play. Okay. I think we've gone over quite a lot, and quite a few of you still online. Does that mean you happy to keep going, or you want to call it a day?
How much content is there still to cover, Howard?
So I'll go through quickly. These are what I really, just in terms of helping people understand how to go to decision quality. We've moved on from data quality, we're now going to decision quality. So I wanted to just take you through some of the things in terms of when we look at their decisions, we should break it up in terms of strategic decisions, significant and quick decisions. And depending on how strategic the decision is, then we need to bring in a lot more rigor and understanding the context and understanding. And in the other areas, we can use pen and paper to actually do it. But it's nice to have an understanding of the decisions, what we're doing, whether we're making lots and lots of quick decisions or whether we're making a few really strategic decisions that we're betting the business on. And if we don't get this right, we're going to get into a lot of problems. So helpful to structure that. And then we've also got decision complexities. So we've got it between organizational complexities where we've got lots of politics, or high analytical complexity where we've got to make a decision. We've got lots of crunching of numbers and stuff like that. Now, depending on where we fit in these different areas, we need to apply a different technique. So in some cases where it's low complexity, we only got one person and there's low analytics, well, we're talking common sense, rules of thumb. And that's a lot of the times that's where our BI is coming in. But then when we have different people interpret in the context and that differently, then we got to apply different approaches to it. And here's one which we refer to as an appraisal life cycle. And then we got a dialogue, a way of bringing all these people together to get the common scenario. And I'm seeing that in some of the places where I work. They've got 6 different departments that have very different views, and you've now got to deal with it in the dialogue. And it's really helpful to have almost a team of people that recognize the situation, ask a team to assess it, agree on the frame, develop alternatives, agree on what the alternatives are, evaluate them all, make a decision, and then commit to it. Now, this is the way we're going. This is what's going to happen. Does that give you guys a better understanding of where we should be, where our understanding needs to be in terms of this decision-making process? DQ is data quality is really just the starting point of one aspect of decision-making.
Makes sense,
Howard?
yeah. I didn't look at it through that optic before.
Okay.
No.
Adele?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to ask, maybe, is this also a way to assist business in defining their requirements?
Definitely. That's one of the biggest things is before we do that, and I think Henny's dropped off, when we do data quality, when we do data warehousing, we look at the requirements on give us your questions and decisions. Teach me about what questions you're going to be asking and what decisions you're going to be making. That to me is a good requirements definition. I have seen very few people that do that as part of the business analysis or business requirements.
Yeah, and I think that is for me. I experience a lot of that where the people just want to. They just give me the data. I'll see what decisions I can make from it. They can't tell you what they are going to decide on what data we're going to use.
And then the unfortunate thing about that is then your BI system or your data warehouse just becomes an ETL tool. Because your front ends look like data dumps and they just put it into Excel and then they start the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. Great. Guys, that's and this is one of those things where you can talk on forever and ever. And I think this is the core of what we do as data management. It's about getting better decisions. That's what it's all about, is enabling the decisions. Sometimes we can enable them with data. And Adele, to your point, if that means we need to do mashups on and do sentiment analysis on Twitter and whatever it is, That's what we're going to do. That's where we're going to start having those discussions, and that's where we start opening up these debates with people and businesses.
Yeah, true. No, thanks for this. It helps actually.
Excellent. Any other questions before we go?
So no question from my side. I think just the thing that I didn't know about today that I learned today was this whole dialogue decision process. I think
Yeah.
that's fairly important. It's often overlooked.
Yeah, and especially
Often overlooked, yeah.
Yeah, I like this one as well, is to be framing my decision complexity. If I'm dealing with multiple departments, if I'm dealing with high complex analytics, we've got different ways of approaching it to get agreement and to get consistency and harmony.
Mhm. Makes sense, yeah.
All right. Guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the engagements and the questions.
Thanks,
Thank you, Howard.
Howard.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate you.
All right, man.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.